If you're a business owner chasing freedom, here's the truth no one tells you. Your business might be the very thing holding you hostage. Most owners build their empire for independence, but end up trapped in a job they can't walk away from. In today's episode, we dive into the uncomfortable reality that 80% of businesses never sell. Not because they aren't valuable, but because the owner is the business. We're talking legacy, lifestyle, and the art of designing your exit so that when you leave, you don't just walk away, you level up. This is the conversation that could change how you build, sell, and live after the business is gone. Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. Welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes. This is the podcast for business owners and investors who are looking to up-level their lives, really, and their business. And today we're talking with Joe Lopresti, who is an author, published author, as well as runs a fractional family office and wealth management firm. A lot of great insights in here for business owners and people looking to potentially exit their business and build up an incredible thing called the lifetime cash flow plan. So stay tuned, listen in. Great episode for anyone looking, to up-level their lives, their business, and so on. And looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this episode. Thanks.
Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions, the place to learn how to fund, scale, exit, and massively profit as an angel investor or entrepreneur. Brought to you by the Angel Investors Network. And now, here's your host, Jeff Barnes.
Welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes. I'm here today with Joe Lopresti. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Really appreciate having you here. And we're going to dive into a lot of great topics today about, maybe wealth planning and exiting your business and how do you prepare for that and one of the common mistakes and pitfalls people make. But before we get into all that, Joe, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So Joe Lopresti and I have a couple of businesses. One is Arlington Wealth Management, which I founded about 25 years ago. More recently, we've also put together and run a fractional family office for small and mid-sized business owners. We could talk, a little bit about that later. But where I started in the wealth management industry 40 years ago now, believe it or not. I worked for a few of the bigger banking brokerage firms early in my career. Pretty quickly realized that that culture wasn't my thing. The sales culture really didn't resonate well with me. So I branched off on my own and went independent. I designed some investment strategies that we use today in our wealth management firm with proprietary models. I cut my teeth as an investment manager, really. And then as our clients got wealthier, we realized that many of them wanted more than just investment advice. So we started to branch out into more advanced planning, which, generally, top of mind is tax mitigation strategies. So more of their money stays in their family and, not going to Uncle Sam. Cash flow planning, wealth transfer, taking care of their heirs, asset protection, all the non-investment related advice that they also had concerns about. And that's what we work with Clearpoint Family Office, is all the non-investment related concerns that business owners tend to have. And so that's where I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have a couple things in common there. When I first got introduced to the financial services world back in 2003, I didn't know what to expect at all. But what I got was not anything close to what I had imagined, right? You were mentioning it's a sales culture. And I found that out too, right? You're going through and you're studying for whether it was, at that time for me, it was in my Series 6 or 63. And then eventually I tried going to college for financial planning. It's like I'm learning all these things about laws and rules and regulations and what to say and what not to say, but I didn't really learn much about how do you actually grow your wealth, right? And so then you get the pitch and you get the presentation like, okay, here's what you tell people. And then you do your whole financial needs analysis. And if you just put money into these mutual funds, you'll eventually in 40, 50 years have enough money to retire, right? And I didn't feel like I was serving people at that point because I wasn't using my brain. I was just parroting everything that I'd learned as far as the rules and what they told me to do. And I didn't really appreciate that. So I think you and I have a lot in common when it comes to that. It's like when you really want to help someone with whatever their situation is and where they want to go, you better know more than just what the rules and regs are, right? And so I think that's it's something that's been a common theme about people that have been on my podcast is that they're not just life insurance and mutual fund salespeople.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had very similar experience, and as because I am a business owner, founding actually my third company now, I feel that I'm a little more uniquely qualified to work with business owners. So that's really the niche that we work in now is business owners and coordinating their business strategy with their personal planning centered around, the life and legacy that they want to design and really get that into a unified approach, which I think business owners struggle in, gathering all of this advice that they get from different advisors, accountants, financial advisors, attorneys, whoever it is, business consultants, and them trying to be the quarterback to get it into some sort of coordinated approach. And that's what we take the bull by the horns and make sure that all the advice is getting centered around what the business owner really wants to do with their life and where they are and where they want to go.
I think that's such an important point to make and emphasize for a lot of people is that, I don't know about you, but when I first got started in business, there was one goal in mind, and that was freedom, right? It was like, I don't want to have this boss. And the irony is that when you're first starting out, you have anything but freedom, right? You are beholden to everybody. But along the way, I feel like there's this Venn diagram, initially your personal life and your business life is all just one big bubble. But as you grow and mature, especially in business and in life, and you end up with responsibilities, mortgages, kids, marriages, whatever that might be, this Venn diagram starts to emerge, which is, okay, I've got my personal life over here and I've got my business life. But of course, as a business owner, they're never fully separated, right? And I think that a lot of people do themselves a disservice by not finding out what that sweet spot is in the middle of how do I align my business and my personal life. And it sounds like that's kind of where you're going with what you're talking about is helping to advise these business owners. Am I correct there?
Absolutely. We think there's a huge void in the advice that business owners get where, nobody is really coordinating all of the different I call it siloed advice, right? You talk to an accountant about your books or accounting needs, and you talk to your financial advisor, and many of them really aren't knowledgeable about your business and the direction that it's going. And many of them, I think the traditional wealth management model is mostly a gathering assets model, right? And the compensation models that are out there in the wealth management industry really restrict what a financial advisor could do. Many of them won't allow you to provide business related advice, and they can't get paid for it. So it's not an area that they become knowledgeable in. So I think that you need advisors that really are knowledgeable in the business strategy and coordinate it with your personal wealth planning if you're going to maximize your potential.
Yeah. I want to talk about what that means for you and inside your firm, especially when you talk about this fractional family office idea. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that. I'm reading a book called, Family Wealth by James Hughes. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not, but kind of talks about this idea of, setting up your family for long-term success, not just your business, because again, business owners generally tend to have families. And we're seeing it happen right now with this, the silver tsunami, like we were mentioning before we started here, these business owners that are, getting to the point where they want to sell or they want to retire. And the latest stat I heard was roughly 80% will not sell because they haven't set it up properly. Their family doesn't want to take it over, and that's what they thought they were going to do. And so this idea of managing a family and their wealth as a whole also is not just the money, but it's also, the human capital, right? The people in your family and how do you take care of them and move forward. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, what does a fractional family office mean? And what are some of the kind of conversations and topics you talk about with your clients?
Yeah. So a fractional family office is really designed to provide solutions for a business owner in whatever their concerns or issues are. So, I think most people are familiar with a family office concept. So the ultra wealthy, think of Jeff Bezos, right, of Amazon, or Elon Musk. They have a single family office where they put together a team of advisors that just work for them and their family. And the reason is that they don't want disjointed advice, right? They don't want to have to meet with an accountant and meet with attorneys and meet with real estate agents and insurance, and all the different complexities that they have even go well beyond what our typical client is going to deal with. But they put together a team. Now, our clients tend to be more entrepreneurs, like founding business owners that, let's say, are in the $5 to $75 million net worth range. They can't put together their own family office. It's just too imperative, it's too costly. So we put together specialists. There's about 75 different specialists in our family office that have, let's say, niche tax planners that deal with a specific area of the tax code, risk mitigation specialists, wealth management, legal, business advisory, where they probably, one client of the family office doesn't need all 75, but they might need 4 or 5 of those niche planners. We have that team available that we could bring into a family's relationship and have it be economical for them, where they could still get the same type of elite solutions that the ultra wealthy business owners have access to, without the prohibitive expense that it would require them to set up their own family office.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think a lot of folks tend to forget about how complex our lives can get, right? Especially as a business owner, and especially when you start talking about an estate, planning for your kids' future, maybe your grandkids' future. The tax laws and tax codes that change on a yearly basis is already enough to overwhelm a lot of people. So that is great that you guys have a service like that really helps to kind of bring it all in the house for people that, like you said, aren't the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk of the world that can just hire whoever they want whenever they want, right?
Yeah,
really important.
And I think the issue many of our clients find themselves in is that they're really good business people. They built something valuable, and they're really good at getting to where they are today, which is, let's use a football analogy. They're at the 20-yard line. But now to get over the goal line, they find all this complexity, right? And you mentioned freedom. We call our process at ClearPoint Family Office the Founder's Freedom Process, because that's what everybody's after. That, business owners started a business because they value freedom over everything else. They wanted to call their own shots, or else they'd be working for somebody else. But now they're dealing with all of this complexity between where they are and where they want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, whatever that timeline is different for each business owner. So you've got financial decisions, you have tax decisions, you have decisions on how to transfer your wealth to your heirs, how to protect your assets from catastrophic risks. Many of our clients have charitable intent, so there's charitable decisions on how to weave that into a comprehensive plan. And then there's the whole business side of the decisions, employees, vendors, the legacy that they built over 20, 30, 40 years of running a business. How's that going to continue on after they exit? Who are the ideal buyers, or how is it going to transition? Is it going to be internal? Am I going to sell to a third party? I have to work with all these different advisors, accountants, attorneys, financial advisors, business consultants, probably a business intermediary, professional at some point as well. And they just struggle with getting coordination around it all. And that's where I think a family office can help them put some unified approach into it all, so they could really live the life that they want and maximize what they've built.
Before continuing, please subscribe and share this video. To to help us reach more people and stay notified of our latest releases. Now, let's continue watching and learning.
I love that. That's perfectly put. So along those lines, business owners tend to fall into this trap, right? They become the owner, operator, wearer of all the hats for a long period of time. And I think they struggle. And I found myself doing this at times as well. It's like struggle with the delegation and eventually stepping away. But more importantly, they even struggle with, well, what does my life look like after the business? And you just kind of hit on that as there's all these thought processes to go through. So at what point in a business owner's career do you guys like to get involved and start having those conversations about, what does life look like after your business?
Yeah. So as far as thinking about harvesting the value of the business, typically that's a 3 to 5 year window, ideally. Let's face it, many business owners are just too busy and they don't think about it that far in advance. They're either busy running their business, or if they're in the sale process, they're so focused on the transaction that they're not thinking about, hey, what's my life going to look like Monday morning after I sell? That's a big reason why sellers end up backing out or just get cold feet and procrastinate on the whole process, is because that isn't well thought out. Some have it more thought out than others, but some really have to flush that out and understand, have that life of purpose, because their identity, their purpose is inside their business, because it's what they've built, and that's how they identify themselves in many cases.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because I've been helping a number of clients with raising the capital for acquiring businesses and whatnot. And, that means I'm sitting on these calls with the sellers, with the brokers, and we're working through this process. And sometimes it's a younger seller that just happens to have built something and they like the entrepreneurial process, but they don't like the business ownership route. And because it's just too much, they don't like being a manager. And it's ironic because we've had a few people back out, just like you were saying, they got the cold feet. But what we found out later was the reason they backed out was because they realized the reason they wanted to sell their business was it was taking way too much of their time. But when they started having conversations and we're going through due diligence and we're asking these questions and can you get this ready for us? All of a sudden the business starts to operate without them. And they're like, wait a minute, you mean I can have freedom and have my business at the same time? This is amazing. And so I think sometimes when you're buying the business, you got to be careful about what you ask them to do before you close the deal.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think sometimes when a business owner gets to the point where it's not completely dependent on them, and they decide, this is a pretty good business, maybe I'll keep it for a while longer because I have more freedom. And when we talk about freedom, it's not just money. It's freedom of time, relationships, who you're spending your time with, freedom of purpose, right, in your life. So I think it's important that, when we talk about business values, that's the first thing we do in our freedom process is, from a business strategy standpoint, we determine what the value is. We determine what the industry benchmarks are. We show them where best-in-class companies fall, what they get, what their valuations are. We compare it to theirs. And a big reason why oftentimes there's a gap is because the business owner the business is too dependent on the owner. And we need to get them out of the core center of everything. So it's a business, because a buyer at the end of the day, they don't want to buy a job. They want to buy a business that is profitable. And so that's a big part of the valuation and enhancing value for a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you're having those conversations with your clients and you're talking about, okay, here's your valuation today, how many of them are like, no, there's no way, it's got to be worth way more than that, versus, wow, it's actually worth that much?
Yeah, so very infrequently do we get, wow, it's worth more than I thought. It's usually the other way around. And most business owners feel that their business is worth more than it is. But if you start working on that transition, getting it transition ready is a big part. Getting the business transition ready, and then getting you transition ready. And we talked about the personal side of the exit. If you improve in those areas, you're going to have a more satisfying exit and you're going to have a more valuable business. So it's just important to know what buyers are paying. You have to look at the business from the perspective of a buyer.
Right.
Owners value it much differently. And we really want to get our clients to change that mindset to what a buyer's going to look at, how they're going to value it, what they find as strengths and weaknesses in businesses. And then the main part of the business path of the freedom process. So we run down two paths, a business strategy and a personal wealth planning path simultaneously. We're focused on maximizing enterprise value with the business strategy path. And that's what we really want our clients to think about. That's what's going to secure their freedom is, what it's making every year, and, funding your lifestyle is important, but you're really going to get financial freedom by maximizing the value that a buyer's going to pay you for.
So what are some of those levers that you guys look at to help increase that valuation and set them up for a successful exit?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it already. So the dependency, owner dependency, how dependent is the business on you? A company that, excuse me, a company that depends heavily on the owner isn't valuable to a buyer unless you plan on working for them. And that's probably not something that you want to do, at least not for very long. Your competitive advantage. What is your unique ability that differentiates your company from its competitors? That makes it more valuable. Like a strategic buyer is going to pay you, that's the highest payer, generally speaking, in the marketplace. If you have a unique proposition, a competitive advantage that they want, they're going to pay top dollar for that because they could, many times instantly take that and offer it to a larger client base, for example, and that's very valuable. Recurring revenue streams. Like if you look at different types of businesses, the ones that have recurring revenue streams, that predictability of recurring revenue is comforting to a buyer because they're not starting at zero, every year or month or quarter, however they look at the business. So there's others, but those are the main drivers of value in a business. Yeah.
I love, the book, The Goal, right, by Eli Goldratt, quite an old book now at this point, but the whole idea is this idea of throughput, and it was written for manufacturing, but that same idea applies for any business, really, which is if you're the bottleneck, then, it's really hard to scale beyond whatever that bottleneck is. And I found that business owners tend to be the bottleneck most of the time, right? And I'm curious how you navigate that when it comes to removing that owner dependency, because I think of it like, a hub and spoke model where if the owner is the hub, and sometimes a lot of the spokes too, everything has to go through them to get anything done. Versus how do you delegate, outsource, change the chain of command if needed? What are those conversations like?
Those are difficult conversations. And, in our family office, we have business advisory specialists that are very good at having those conversations. So the role that I play is I call myself your personal chief financial officer for the business owner, right? I'm not your company's financial officer. I'm yours. I'm going to make sure all the plans advocate for you, what you want to do in life, what's really important to you. And on each client case, we have a business advisor that works with them on their business strategy, determining the value, determining what it could be worth, protecting its value, enhancing the value, harvesting the value. And then we have a wealth planner that works with them on all of the personal wealth planning, setting up a lifetime cash flow plan, a tax mitigation plan, asset protection, wealth transfer, investments, everything regarding the personal planning. And then we have the niche specialists in the family office that just work in a very, like an inch wide and a mile deep in a particular area that a business owner may need. So I let them have those conversations mostly because they're very good at it. It's all that they do. They work with businesses that have that that struggle where it's all built around the owner, and how can you move from that hub and spoke type of model to something that is not dependent on the owner. That's all that they do, and they're very good at those conversations.
And I think it's one of those things it's probably, like you were saying, a hard conversation to have initially, because knowing the business owners that I know, it's their baby, right? And it's kind of like letting your kid go and go be their own their own self after a point, right? It's a little bit challenging for a lot of parents.
Well, we let them see it themselves. So there's a fairly comprehensive assessment that we do of each business, and if you ask a business owner, hey, what would happen if you're not here for 90 days? What would happen to the business? Would you lose business? Would you gain business? Would it be the same? Would you not miss a beat? And they know. I mean, at the end of the day, they know that if they're not there for 90 days, there's going to be some issues and probably a loss of business. That's when it's easy to have that conversation with them to say, hey, that a buyer this isn't valuable to a buyer, because you're not going to be here after you sell. Maybe there's a transition period where you are, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be here. They're not willing to pay top dollar for a business that is dependent on you.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point for people to understand, is that you're not selling a job, you're selling a business. And a business is an integrated, network of systems that ideally is creating shareholder value. In other words, profits and growth, right? And the shareholder is the new owner, right? And I think a lot of business owners don't think of themselves as a shareholder. They think of themselves as an operator. And they just want somebody to take off all of this burden from them. And they forget, well, I got to fix it before I can do that. And I think that's going back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of people, once they fix it, so they're not just the operator, they are a shareholder, it does free them up from a lot of the things that were making them want to sell in the first place. And probably also gives them the space to think about it in a more strategic fashion.
No, you're spot on there. That's words cannot be more true.
There was one more thing you said in when you were talking about this that I want to hit on a little bit, which is a little bit of a departure from the topic here. But you said, we want to help set them up with their lifetime cash flow plan. What does that mean? Because it sounds amazing, right? I think you need to trademark that one. Let's create your lifetime cash flow plan. But what does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, essentially what we want to do is look at their life from, while they're in business, through the sale or transition, and then life after business. What is it that you need or want to be able to live the life that you want to, to really have that personal freedom without worrying about money? Let's talk about that now. Let's get that into, we have, pretty advanced cash flow planning software that we put together a plan for them. It helps us see where their income is going to come from and helps them see where their income is going to come from. It gives them a lot of clarity into the future that I think business owners don't have, because they see how they're getting their income now, but they don't understand how they'll get their income. They don't understand how they'll get their income after their business life. And the cash flow plan helps them see that. It also helps us understand the tax liability through their lifetime. Of course, we have to make a lot of assumptions during that, but what are they paying now in taxes? What will they pay with a transaction, a sale during a liquidity event? What will they pay to get their income after? You could set future income up to be tax efficient if you plan that out in advance. And of course, then you start working with them on, hey, how could I reduce the taxes on the sale, which is usually the biggest transaction in their life. And oftentimes they're paying their biggest tax bill ever during that period. Right. So it gives us a lot of information to be able to be good advisors for them and how to set up their investments and, what type of wealth is going to transfer to their heirs, for example, and what are good ways to do that. What are the estate taxes going to look like, and how could we plan to mitigate those? but it gives them a lot of clarity as well. And I think they get a ton of value from a lifetime cash flow plan.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, selling your business is not as simply as contacting a broker and saying, "Hey, I'm done. Take it and sell it for me." No?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, there are, entrepreneurs that will do that, and it's not going to maximize
Right.
it's not going to maximize their life work. Right. So
And not set them up for a lifetime of success after the business, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
lot to think about. There's no doubt about it. So Joe, we're running out of time here, but before we wrap up here, there's one last question I want to ask you, and that is, knowing what you know now, having gone through, like you were saying, about 4 decades of experience in the financial services world and helping clients, if you can go back to your former self, your younger self, right before you got into this business and got going on this journey, what is one piece of advice you'd love to be able to give your younger self?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say it's to follow the business, run the business that you want to run 20 years from now. Start running that today. I think that business owners, they have this ideal business in mind, and they have the one that they're actually running. And because that one that they're running pays the bills and it's easy, it's what they know, they don't put the strategic planning in to the one that they want to run. If you start that now, you're going to have a more valuable enterprise. You're going to have more freedom, and you're going to have more wealth ultimately.
That's awesome. I love that, because I think it's such a common occurrence for business owners to find themselves essentially stuck in an owner's trap, right? And we've talked about it a lot today, but I think that's really important. I like that advice. I'm going to take that one to heart too. It's something I've been thinking about a lot in my business, so that's great. Really appreciate it, Joe. Before we wrap up here, how can people find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways. One of the easiest ways is just go to clearpointfamilyoffice.com, and that's our website. You can get in contact with me there. LinkedIn, of course. And we didn't talk about it, but I also authored a book, Exit by Design, and there's a website for that as well. Any listener could download a free ebook version of it on the website. That's exitbydesignbook.com.
Perfect. Well, we will make sure that we get all of those links in the show notes. So if you're watching this or listening to this, make sure you go check out those show notes, get in touch with Joe, go check out his businesses. Definitely check out his book, especially if you're a business owner. Wealth of information here today, and we only just touched the surface. So, Joe, I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. So this has been Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. Thanks so much for listening, watching, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Take care.